For floor 94, the key, AoE. Welcome and what's going on, guys? This is Arkaden, and today we're going to talk through Abyss floor 94. Lots to talk about. There's a lot of different ways that you can take this floor down, thankfully, so you don't need to have specific characters, and I'm going to prove it. Today we did a composition that actually is not even that good. It actually has a lot of room for improvement, and I'll talk through ways that you can actually just do this better if you don't have either the gear or the characters that I use. So let's start with the character I wouldn't want to replace. Seasidebologna is absolutely amazing on this particular fight. You need AoE damage, not just like it suggested. Literally, you must use AoE damage to actually even hit the shades from Assassin Cidd in this fight. So the inevitable amount of damage that just comes out from Seasidebologna's S2, as well as having an S3 that she can wait to use because debuffs are not a big deal in this particular fight at all. You can actually use any and all of SSB's abilities, and you're only going to be using her S1 directly on the real A Cidd. The shades are just going to get nuked and get defense broken and get all the debuffs, but mostly just the damage. Also, with the SSB, I really loved using Drink. If you have Drink, use it because it's extra added damage that is considered AoE, and so it will actually like stack on top of the damage you're already doing. Super, super nice. Honestly, not a necessity for this fight, but definitely one of the characters that I wouldn't want to go in without because it's just that useful. The other AoE ability character that I decided to bring in was Arbiter Vildred, and if you know anything about Arby, his S3 is the only real AoE that he has, so he actually isn't even that great, to be quite honest, for this particular fight. I used him because I just wanted to see if we could do it and kind of make a comp that just didn't make as much sense, just to see if it was just an outgearing, outpacing fight that we could do. And truly, with the gear that I have on him, it absolutely did outpace. And if you look like stats-wise, that's kind of what my RB looks like. But the reality was this: if the shades were ever up on the boss, and I had to ever use my S1, I did almost no damage, because if you don't AoE and actually hit all of the targets, it doesn't count as being as big of damage. So luckily, we had enough AoE between the SSB going with him and his S3 whenever the shades were up that we were able to take them out very quickly, so it was no problem. But I would suggest Green Bellona, I would suggest Fire Tenebria. Things that have more than one AoE, like actual AoE ability, are so much better for damage dealers on this particular fight. The next character we brought in this fight was Achates. Phenomenal. I mean, again, you use her on a lot of different floors. You can use her in a lot of different content in the game. She's just such a versatile 4-star unit. Obviously, you'll want her at 6-star by the time you're using her here, but she is just incredible across the board. Being able to cycle between her S2 and her S3 for just general invincibility on herself, and then being able to just strip off the debuffs that come up from either the shades or from the boss. She's incredibly good. One of the things that I would have done better taking in Achates, if I went and I was really trying to do this fight super, super effectively, I would probably get rid of Rod, and I would probably instead put on Wondrous Potion Vial, because anything that can get rid of some of those stuns that come out, because you'll notice that the boss, whenever he attacks at certain points, he will actually hit and stun one player on your team, and then he'll hit and stun another one. Well, if he happens to hit Achates, you're missing out on potential healing there, and that really kind of stinks. So having something like Wondrous Potion Vial, especially if you have one that's plus 30 and is 100% of the time going to get rid of something, very beneficial, so that you're still able to keep your heals up. But amazing, amazing unit for this particular fight. Finally, I ended up bringing Lilias. Lilias is actually so unnecessary for this particular fight for so many different reasons. And I realized this after I did this recording, but that's one more reason why I'll explain it now. Number one, we used Hillag Lance. Completely unnecessary for this fight. If you were going to even bring a tank for a lot of PvE content, you want something more like Adamant Shield or Aureus, or something that's actually going to absorb damage. Otherwise, why would you bring a tank? Why wouldn't you just bring either another healer or another damage dealer? So in this case, we brought Lilias, and her only thing that she did effectively was basically get dual attacks every once in a while for fun, which, by the way, those dual attacks, if there were shades up, did almost no damage. And then you'd have her S3 to be able to cleanse off if any poisons were up, if any stuns were up that didn't happen to land on her. She was basically there used as a glorified secondary cleanser that didn't heal. So honestly, I would take Angelic Montmorency. I would take any healer that has the potential to do more for this fight than Lilias does, because when we start getting into the mechanics of the fight and the way that Cidd attacks and the way that it works, you're either going to get really hard hit by Cidd, or you're going to be at full health, and you're actually, depending on what your health is on your characters, will depend on how Cidd actually interacts with them. So having two healers is way better for that control. So not having that, not having any of the mitigation, none of that said, Lilias, pretty mediocre pick for this particular fight. But you'll see when we get into it, and we'll jump into the fight here in a second, that it actually still goes just fine. So as we jump right into the fight, basically wave 1 is a pretty easy wave that actually will give your team literally no problems at all. You have so much AoE between the Arbiter Vildred and the Lilias S3 and the inevitable S3, S2 combos that you're going to randomly get from your SSB. This wave goes down so fast. You'll notice I actually auto it and then realize like pretty quickly, oh, I should probably stop this so I can make sure I have all of my cooldowns up when it's time for wave 2. This I end up doing here right at the end so that we're pretty much right on track right when it's time. But you'll also see that my RB gets very, very low, mostly due to just having it on auto and instead of just doing the healing. So it's a fast enough wave. I don't think you need to auto it. You're not too worried about like stacking up Archies or anything for this particular fight. They do come in handy, and you'll see me use them a couple times, but not because I saved them up in wave 1. So as we jump into phase 2, the way that Assassin Cidd works is he's kind of a boss that can be cascading devastation if you don't do the things in the right order or you're not ready for the particular things to happen. With that kept in mind, if you do the things in the proper order, this boss will feel extremely easy. Like when you watch me beat this, there's almost no times where it's ever even remotely questionable that somebody would die. So let's talk through what things need to exist for there to be no problems here. Number 1, and I would call this the most important one because it has to deal with the shades. So he'll use the S3, it will AoE, it will defense break your team completely on all 4 characters, and 2 shades will pop up to go along with Assassin Cidd. Assassin Cidd will also be stealthed and immune during the time that those 2 shades are alive. Shades can only be attacked by AoE damage, and I don't mean dual attacks, and I don't mean things that can hit a couple things. I mean literally it has to hit everyone or it doesn't count for damage. So the biggest passive thing on Assassin Cidd that needs to be talked through is the murder passive. When the caster attacks while stealthed, it penetrates the enemy's defense by 50% if the enemy's health is 100% or more. So that means if your team is 100% or more, when Assassin Cidd does his damage, it's going to penetrate your defense, but it's only going to be penetrating by 50%, and you can kind of be okay as long as you have a good amount of heals to be able to keep yourself up. If your team is at 70% or less, it will make them unhealable and inflict a decreased hit chance for 2 turns. And then, if your team is 30% or less and you get hit, it will actually instant kill your target and inflict extinction. So even if you had made Chloe or Ruel in here, you'd never be able to bring that character back because they got under 30% and they got hit by the Assassin Cidd. So make sure that you have 100% of the time that your characters are being kept at a very high health threshold, because if they don't, you'll run into having decreased hit chance. Well, that's not a big deal except for when you look at some of the other passives. The poisons that can come from these shades is supposed to be pretty intense damage, but it also stops you from getting as much healing. So if you can't heal as much the first time and it happens once, you're going to already have to heal even more to be able to make up that difference, number 1. Number 2, you're also increasing the speed of all of his allies for 2 turns, which is just happening when you miss, right? So anytime you miss, because you have a miss chance up now on your characters and it hits these shades, it's now increasing the speed of the shades so that they go even more, putting more debuffs on, making it even more difficult to do. So this becomes extremely difficult to deal with if your characters get too low and you don't actually cleanse off those debuffs fast enough, and then you start missing shades. All of it stacks up to be an incredibly difficult fight. If you, however, make sure to keep that under control, you're always dispelling all of your debuffs off, you're always keeping everybody at a really high amount of health, and as long as you're using AoE abilities, you'll crush through the shades like they're no problem at all, and you'll be spending most of your time single target attacking the actual Assassin Cidd. So keeping this in mind, the Assassin Cidd will actually like attack once and he'll stun somebody, and then he'll attack again and he'll stun somebody else. This is where the Wondrous Potion Vial, or having 2 healers that can cleanse, or in our case we have Lilias and Achates. Hopefully one of those 2 doesn't get stunned, so you can just cleanse it right off, whether that's with the S3 of Achates or the S3 of Lilias. And then also, if I had any times where I didn't feel like I was going to get the damage in on any of the characters because I had to use either an S1, I could just use Arky. You'll notice I use Arky several times here just for the extra AoE damage, because that does count as AoE and will actually do the amount of damage that's supposed to happen. If everything goes to plan, then when Assassin Cidd does hit 50% and actually starts casting and gaining 4 shades, it's the same as basically 2 shades for you, and nothing will feel like anything's really changed. However, if you're not getting rid of those debuffs and you're not having enough AoE damage to actually crush them down fast enough, this fight will become more challenging. So focus your efforts. Make sure that you've got as much damage output as you can on your 2 AoEers, because you're not really trying to stop incoming damage. Make sure that you don't take an extra tank. You may as well have either 2 healers that are both on Wondrous Potion Vial, or 1 on Wondrous, 1 on Rod, just for the extra healing, and keep your characters at a high HP. If you can manage all of this, this fight is actually not that bad at all, and you'll see that as we continue to finish it for the rest of the fight. So that's pretty much the fight. There's obviously lots of room for improvement, but there's not at the same time, because we did keep the boss at a very high, or basically fully under control, by keeping our characters at a high level of health, as well as making sure that those debuffs were getting taken off constantly. We were totally fine, but I understand that a lot of people that are going to be stuck on 94, you're going to look at it and be like, oh, well, your gear's better. You're right. I mean, my gear is better. So that's why we tried to do it on like a more difficult scale, and did it without using all the things. I would suggest that for most people, if this is the current content that you're stuck on, make sure that you're using Wondrous Potion Vial. Make sure that you're using 2 healers. Make sure that you're using 2 good AoE DPS that are going to do solid damage for you, because that's going to make such a huge impact. And then just keep your guys just topped off. Keep them topped off and you'll be set. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you do love our content here, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. We love hearing from you, and we will see you guys in the next either Abyss video or whatever's next. Peace, dudes.